Hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome to this inspiring talk with AIPSA. We're very glad to have you here, such a high number, and we hope you will enjoy the webinar this afternoon. So a very short introduction on myself. My name is Angelo Ruocco. I'm one of the members of the board of AIPSA, the Security Association, and I'm in charge for international networking. Very exciting work, I'm telling you. So what happens today? Just you know that the present pandemic has shaped what is now called the new normal. So working from home, smart working, and all these different scenarios, and all companies are rapidly moving into a very massive digital transformation, which for which, let's say, cybersecurity is a major concern. So cybersecurity risks, as you know very well, have a significant impact on reputation, on legal, on compliance, on operations. And this is what we will try to discuss here with our special guest, Mrs. Emma Smith, Global Cybersecurity Director with Vodafone. My colleague Corradino Corradi from AIPSA boards and also cybersecurity with Vodafone Italy will be moderating the webinar. Enjoy your show. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Angelo.
So thanks a lot, Angelo, and very welcome to Emma from my side. I'm very pleased to have Emma, the Director of Cybersecurity in Vodafone, with us. I hope that you will find her talk, her advice inspiring for all of you, especially the next generation of the member of the association. So Emma, thanks a lot for your time. We really appreciate it. Let's start talking a little bit about you, your career, how you fell in love with security, how you become CISO.
Thanks, Corradino. And sadly, I'm not in the younger generation anymore. I'm still in denial about that. But in the UK, the vaccine is being rolled out by age, and I'm now in that age group. So I'm not in the younger generation. As you said, I'm the CISO for Vodafone. I've been here for 5.5 years, and before that, I was the Chief Security Officer for a UK bank, and I was there for 13 years. My career, I didn't study computer science. I didn't do any security-related degree. I studied economics at university, and didn't really know what I wanted to do in my career when I left university. I knew I wanted to carry on studying. And so I looked for a graduate program that was close to home and that would give me professional qualifications. I knew I wanted to be based in the UK, but I was quite open-minded about what I did. And I ended up doing a graduate internal audit program, which was a 2-year program. And the great thing about it was that I got trained professional qualifications in internal audit. And that meant I learned about risk and control. And I also studied technology audit and got my qualifications quite a long time ago now in technology audit. And I really started to then get the bug for technology and found myself wanting to do all of the audits that were technology related, which often are mostly about security or resilience, and started really focusing all of my time on that. But when I made the transition from audit into security, it was actually the chief administrative officer in the company that I worked for had been mentoring me. And I'd been auditing security for years and basically writing lots of recommendations about how to do security. And they said, well, actually, come and help out, come and get your hands dirty and show us how to do security. So I was asked to move over.
So moving from the advice to the
doing, yeah, exactly. And the doing it, trust me, it feels a lot harder than the auditing, although auditing's not easy either. And I moved over, the month before. I was working in a bank in 2008, and it was the month before the financial crisis. And I was asked to take over the security team, basically in the middle of the financial crisis. And first of all, fell in love with security properly at that point, but also realised how difficult it was, especially up against something like a crisis like the financial crisis. And I've stayed in security ever since. That was 14 years ago now, and I'm really happy that this is my profession. I don't really want to go and do anything else other than security. I think it's the altruistic side.
At the time, it was called information security, and then
it
evolved over the time.
It was, yeah, it was.
Yeah, we started with "I love you" viruses, very simple on the email, to now these advanced persistent threats. So we have seen many things over this year. Thanks a lot. It's interesting that you start from economics. I think this opened up a lot the mind, because we have always the tendencies to move on technical details. We fell in love with the solution, but I think having a more holistic view that is also driven by risk and the economics is important. Could you tell us a little bit more of the role that you have now in Vodafone, how you have organized your team, a little bit also your mission, because you were referring when you joined the Vodafone. I remember at the time you did an assessment with a third party, and then you created the first vision 2020, and now the new one 2025. So I think all the attendees are interested understanding a little bit more how you have organized it in order to meet your objectives in Vodafone.
So I joined Vodafone in 2015 after working in banking for 13 years, decided that I wanted to move into a more technology orientated company and joined Vodafone. And the threat landscape, we'll maybe talk about it later, but the threat landscape is definitely different between banking and telco. The first thing I did was, when you join any new company, I think you need to understand the culture of the company, and you need to understand the strategy and the purpose of the company, so that the security strategy fits really nicely into where the whole company is going. Otherwise, it will jar with the executives. And we've got a corporate security function in Vodafone as well, who look after business continuity and all of the aspects around fraud and physical security. And we immediately decided to create one security strategy for the company, regardless of how we're organized. Let's try and get all of the security teams aligned around one vision. The vision that we've agreed for security is a secure, connected future for our customers and society. And the reason we picked those words and that vision is that it was about enabling the company, so a connected future, because our business is all about connectivity, and that it focused around not just our customer base and not just our company, but also society, and how we contribute back to a safer internet, safer countries that we operate in, safer communities. So we really want to extend the role of the security team beyond the perimeter of the company or our customer base and try and contribute back. And then you asked me about how we're organized. So we have a mix of local teams and central teams who deliver cybersecurity for the whole company. Wherever possible, we try and build real depth of expertise centrally. So we have a 24/7 cyber defense capability who do all of the security monitoring, security incident response. And we found by bringing those teams together, there's better career paths, better depth of expertise. And then we're also trying to simplify all of the tools and technologies that we use in security and consolidate those across our different parts of the footprint. We operate in Europe, in Africa, and we've got a very large shared services team in India. So a pretty global footprint, and it makes the job culturally very rich, which is where the leadership side of that really appeals to me, because we're dealing with people in different countries all of the time. And it also makes the threat landscape really interesting and challenging as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I must admit that being in a local market, so one of the more than 10 local markets, a little bit years ago when Emma was drafting with the leadership team in Vodafone, this scenario, I was a little bit skeptical being in a local market about this centralization. But years later, also with a changing role, so now I'm more on the DPO on the privacy side, having this central structure, when you have an incident that can become or not become a data breach, you see the value of a very people super committed, hyper skilled on computer forensics or incident management that introduce discipline on the way to manage things, and then you realize the benefits. So you see it when you are in trouble, and have truly a friendship and a relationship with.
We also learn, because if we experience something in Italy, then I get the benefits of being able to take those learnings to Spain, to Germany, to the UK, and so I think we get real benefits because of that global footprint. The other thing, Corradino, I was going to mention, I think you probably find this as well, but I find security is both strategic and operational in a company. And that's what I really like about my role, is that we touch sort of all parts of the company. We're involved in all the new product development, all of the strategies. We get to go to the board and the executive committee and talk about cyber risk. But it's also super operational. I run a 24/7 team. I've got systems and platforms that have to be operational all of the time. We interact with customers. So for me, security gives a real opportunity to have quite a broad career path in the company and know what's going on and have different touch points, even though it's a function in its own right. It feels very broad.
Yeah, I think building on this one, another things that impressed me, because it seems obvious, but it's not, is on the first strategy review, you put as a first pillar, fix the basics.
Yeah.
So everybody, I'm talking now, especially on the young generation that is connected with us, want to talk about artificial intelligence and the hybrid cloud, how secure the end policy in a complex environment. But in reality, especially for people that have been on the field many years, sometimes the shit happened on the most basic stuff: stolen password, the system not paged, very well-known vulnerability disclosed that has not been fixed. So maybe building on this dual approach, working on the operational when you need to be excellent, but at the same time see the long-term view and work on risk acceptance and managing the expectation of the board and so on. Maybe you can build a little bit on this one, because I think Vodafone on this is unique.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And everybody wants to do quantum and cloud and AI, but actually patching and hardening and access management, all of those hygiene controls are more important in the connected super digital world that we live in. So it's a really fine balance, particularly with people who are curious and technical, to keep them motivated to want to focus on things like patching. But we try and incentivize people by saying, let's get all the operational hygiene and basics working really well. That will free up then capacity for us to work on the exciting new things that are coming along. And I would really advise anybody not to neglect the basics. You know, vulnerability management, patching and hardening, to me, are the core foundations. And it's easy to say, and they're very hard to get into the DNA of a company if they're not already there. And then thinking a bit more about the strategies that we've got in place. The first pillar has always been about doing the basics and keeping that control evolution and finding a way to measure that across the company, because Vodafone's a very data-driven company. And I found by having metrics for each country and each function, we can see how each area is doing, and that's created incentives and competition and motivation. So that's been really important. And then bringing to life in. Sorry, go on. Go on.
No, on this one, another thing that I think was super important, at least for me and for Luigi, that is in the call. I say ciao, Luigi. Was this cybersecurity baseline and the 5 level. So simplify things that are complex. Put in something that top management can easily understand. For example, 3, you are good, but not enough. 4 is a good level. 5, you are the best. If you are 2, is crap. You need immediately to fix because you have huge vulnerability. So maybe building a little bit on how you create the cyber security baseline, that is something unique when you merge it together. Telco, AIT, because IT in our business was not enough. Again, this is related to the peculiarity of industries. Each industry need to find a set of control that are different, the banks from the telco for manufacturing and so on and so forth. And then on those one, try to have some level, easy to understand in a way that as a mantra, you keep repeating in the top management, in a way that everybody from the marketing guy to the people in the call center know what good look like.
Yeah, exactly. And finding a mechanism in every company that works is really important, because we all know that good security requires the whole company to care about security and do the right thing. And so that the cybersecurity baseline was the method that we used to measure whether the controls are effectively mitigating risk. And probably the most important part, I think, of most CISO's job is to be able to articulate residual risk and whether that risk is in the company's tolerance or not, or whether it's too much risk. And often measuring that risk can be really challenging. So the cybersecurity baseline was our way of doing that and trying to drive consistent standards across every part of the company, regardless of the part of the world or the different regulations. And we built it using ISO 27001, the international standard. We also looked at NIST and cross-referenced it to the NIST standard, which is the US government standard. It's very good for some of the more technical aspects. And then we built in some network security controls for mobile and fixed networks specifically. So it's 48 key controls. They've been pretty static, the overall 48 controls. And we measure those consistently across every part of the company. And we're trying to get a KRI, a metric, key performance or a key risk indicator for every single one of those, so that at any point in time, we know how well controlled we are. And it's been a real motivator putting that into the objectives of the other technology directors as well.
Yes, truly. Then, as Luigi can also say, not easy to achieve. So a lot of work on the security community, but I think it was truly important. Emma, let's talk a little bit about also COVID and the huge number of employee and colleagues of us that now are in smart working. How you can see this challenging the scenario of the cybersecurity, how this is also affecting the way you are redesigning the strategy for the future. As myself and Luigi were discussing many times, but also with Angelo and the board in the association, we have seen in Italy plus 200% in terms of ransomware and sophisticated phishing. We have seen this year has been like the last 3 years in Italy, a record number of data breaches. So for sure, the number of attacks is increasing, also because the perimeter of the company is evolving, is broader at least, maybe it's even weaker, because some of the smart working has been done by many small and medium enterprises in a hurry. So now we start discussing also about multi-factor authentication much more than before, zero trust network. So how you can see the impact of the COVID as for a cybersecurity director?
It's been sort of the perfect storm, but also the opportunity to get some things done more quickly that might have taken longer. So I think I'd split it into three main parts: the threat landscape, the technology and the sort of security architecture, and then the people impact. So the threat landscape, as you said, has worsened, and there's some really good reports by companies like Microsoft that give some real data points around exactly how. But you're right, we've seen an increase in ransomware, an increase in phishing, and to support, and alongside that, everybody's sending more emails than they used to. I think in Vodafone, we're sending almost 100% more emails than we used to before the pandemic. So amongst the busy inbox, there are now more phishing emails as well. And then we saw COVID being used as a lure to attract people to go and click on links or to go and read the latest information. So we've also seen healthcare and vaccine companies being targeted with cyber attacks. So I think more than ever, we've seen that criminals are, if we didn't already know it, their ethics are very different, and they have really exploited this situation to try and make financial gain. We've also seen, I guess, all levels of threat actor really, exploit the pandemic. And then, as you were saying, our controls have had to adapt. So Vodafone partly relied on the corporate network as one of our key points of control. So when people wanted to access services, they would log onto the network either over a VPN or in the office. And that was a key point of control for us because a lot of our data routed over that network. We've had to then move our controls so they still work when people are not on the corporate network. So making sure that the anti-malware alerts still report back, for example, making sure that people's laptops can still be patched if they're not on the corporate network. So it's really made us adjust some of the things that we were going to adjust anyway, but we've had to go faster on them. And that there's a model of, there's a buzzword of zero trust that gets talked about a lot in cybersecurity, which is really about protecting the identity, protecting the device, protecting the data from any network and being agnostic of the network, and implementing zero trust properly really then makes proper home working very accessible and very secure. So it's affected the security controls and how we apply them. And then it's taken a real strain on people. We've got people all around the world that have been affected differently, whether it's been locked down in Milan, or we've got in Pune, we've got a large team at the moment in India who are heavily affected by the infection rates going up. So people and the security teams and the broader organization have really felt the strain over the last 12 months. And I think the support that we've put in place for people, so that we don't bombard them with security messages and they get what they need to know, but not another thing that creates pressure and friction. So having frictionless security is even more important at a time like this for the employee population. And then the last dimension, I guess, for us, Corradino, as Vodafone, is that connectivity has never been more important. As people, whether it's with work or families, need to stay in touch remotely. And so making sure our business still operates to serve customers in the way it's designed has been the #1 priority for the whole company.
Thank you, Emma, for your inspiring words. Angelo, I will make another question to Emma, if you don't mind. And then a couple of questions have arrived. So maybe while I'm making the question and Emma is answering, then you can read a couple of questions coming from the colleagues. So the other question, Emma, you mentioned your previous activities in the bank. Can you tell us a little bit about the differences between the bank and the risk acceptance culture, heavy regulated business and so on? What, when you arrived, you found in Vodafone, how you improved the situation? Because I remember many early discussion when you said that there is no risk culture, so we need to start with this, try to work more on the risk, and then we'll adapt technology to the risk level defined by the manager, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So difference and similarities between those two major industries.
I think I'd say banks have been faster in the digital journey and enabling a digital journey for customers probably than telcos. If you think about the banking apps and the way that they've developed in the digital channels, and that's meant the security teams have probably adapted quicker inside financial services as well. But I definitely noticed a difference in the risk culture. Not that banking has it perfect, because I felt sometimes it was overly bureaucratic and very, very regulated in banking. Now, the telecommunications sector is becoming increasingly regulated, as you know, in Italy with the golden powers. In the UK, we've got the security regulations. In Ireland, we've got new regulations. So both sectors are very heavily regulated. They're both critical national infrastructure in most countries, so the governments really care about them operating. They both care about high availability and resilience. But I felt we had further to travel in the telecommunications sector. And I, at the time, don't think the telecommunications security teams collaborated as well, probably as the banks did. The banks had worked hard because of fraud. The banks had worked really hard to collaborate and create industry groups that weren't just tied to one country. And maybe because a lot of the banks are global, there was really good global networks. So I think that's really improved in telcos. And then both sectors, a lot of sectors face the same threats. So the threats are very similar in terms of the motives of the attackers and the methods that they use. And the security team's job is often very similar in different sectors. But adapting it so that it fits with the culture of the company is probably the main change I had to make, where I came in and I knew I couldn't do the same things again because it wouldn't work, and I'd have to find different ways of influencing in Vodafone than I did in the bank I worked for. And then I tend to think my job's a bit more complicated now because I worked for a global bank and we had very complex IT, but we didn't have massive networks, customer networks to run. And so in telecommunications, I think our job is that bit more interesting because we have all of the IT and we have fixed networks and mobile and IoT. and some very complex enterprise customers using those networks. So I like the extra technical challenge of having those products and being part of a bigger ecosystem. But love being part of critical national infrastructure because it means we're contributing to national security as well.
Thank you very much. Angelo, to you, in a way that we can report the first couple of questions.
Yes, I see a very interesting question here from Paolo Emma. He says, we appreciate you as Vodafone have a strong security governance, but in the Italian enterprise market, there's a little awareness. How do you support your Vodafone business organization to upskill your sales force so that they can spread the security culture in the market? Thanks a lot.
That's a great question. If anybody has the answer, let me know. It's a really good question. So we work very closely with Vodafone Business to make sure the products and services that we sell are secure when they go to market, and also on some of the bespoke offerings for big enterprise customers. And then we're just at the moment working with the central cloud and security business to basically try and upskill the account managers in security topics, not so that they're deep technical experts, but so that they know enough to be able to have good conversations inside customer enterprise businesses. So we're working with them at the moment to say, well, what's the right level of knowledge, so that they're not, because we don't want to try and make the whole workforce security specialists. That wouldn't work either. But at least that they know enough to be saying the right thing when they're having conversations with customers. And then we've also brought together a small team who will work to respond to customer inquiries specifically as well. It was quite localized before, and we found different responses going back. And so we're bringing together a small team who can then, where customers want to dig a bit deeper on security topics, we can make sure they get access to the right people.
Thank you very much. Paolo, I hope that answers your question. I'm sure it does. Then we have another question which is quite peculiar. I don't want to trigger a diplomatic incident. I'm kidding, I'm joking. But this is Tamoy from SNAM's security department. Tamoy says, Emma, I'm curious to hear from you about the role of the Chinese companies in the UK's and Europe's telecommunication network. Do you see the integration of pieces of technology from China as a threat or an opportunity?
This is where I sit on the fence and don't answer the question, I think. It's a very politically charged topic at the moment. I'll maybe let Corradino chip in as well. Chip in, pardon the pun. I think with any technology, regardless of the origin of the headquarters of the company, it's important to understand how it's built, how it operates, and how we're going to use it, and to have done the right security assurances and testing over that technology. So that would be my overall answer. And I think if you look at the recent Mandiant SolarWinds breach, that tells us that third-party compromise won't necessarily be by the government into a company of origin. So I think we have to look at the risk as risk professionals. We have to look at the real security risk of the products that we use and make sure we understand the security risk and are managing it regardless of the debate that's going on around the origin of companies. I think in most European countries, there will be specific regulations that inhibit or restrict the companies that we can and can't work with anyway. We will, of course, follow those laws and regulations.
Thank you very much. That really does make sense.
Yeah, and this is the point. The last sentence is the most important one. So we know that in many countries there is a new wave of protectionism, and each country decide to have a specific level of security. So in some countries, some foreign equipment manufacturers are allowed. In other countries are blocked ex ante. In other countries are blocked ex post if they don't follow specific measure. So as Emma said, if we are a critical national infrastructure, we have some obligation of the government. In Vodafone, they are different based on the country. So UK went from a specific posture on Chinese. Italy has a different one. Germany is a different one. So we follow 100% what the government asks us to do. But in general, we tend to be venture neutral and technology neutral. So we base the analysis on the fact.
Absolutely. While you carry on with your questions, I would just like to tell the audience, don't be shy. The first two questions were very challenging and very interesting indeed. So please keep asking questions. Please go to
anything at all. There are no daft questions.
Okay, I'll make another one. Then, Angelo, there is also a question from Daniela that we'll pick it up later on. So, Emma, you mentioned it before, the importance of the people, one of the pillars in the pandemic. I know that you are also a champion of diversity and inclusion, an important ambassador among the senior director in Vodafone. So could you tell us a little bit about it? Because we have many research now that say that if you have a diverse team, the performance of the team are better. But I think it's not only about the number of the performance, it's much more about the value. You felt it very strongly. So up to you.
I do feel it very strongly, Corradino. I'm really passionate about diversity, and it stems back to my dad, my father. He was very anti-discrimination, and when I was young, I grew up when Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister in the UK, so the first and only at the second of the two female PMs that we've had, and I grew up not really thinking I'm a girl or I'm a woman. I was just me, and it only dawned on me when I started working that it didn't feel equal, and all the things that my dad had told me about go off and you can achieve so much, and it hadn't dawned on me that I'd be treated sometimes differently because I was a woman, and that really started to come. I felt it more when I started working than probably at school or university. Now that doesn't mean I've experienced probably things that others have experienced, but it still felt hard, and so I've made it a personal mission to really try and make my team as inclusive to everybody as possible. And allow people to be themselves at work so that they can come to work and feel free to be themselves and be respected for being themselves. So that means I'm now the LGBT plus sponsor for technology in Vodafone, and we did a lot of research around lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans people who, especially when they first leave university, when they start work, they will often go back into the closet and hide their sexual orientation at work. Or on a graduate rotation program, it meant that people had to come out like 3 times and declare. And so doing that research has really made me think about how we build more inclusive teams. When I first joined Vodafone, the cybersecurity team that sat under me was only 9% women. So I immediately felt uncomfortable that there weren't more people like me around me, and I didn't really understand why. And so we had to adjust the way that we recruited, and also think about retention strategy. So I'd really encourage the men and the women on the call just to think about how you can help bring other people along and create inclusive teams where people can be themselves. You'll find it so rewarding, and when you've got that team of people who respect each other just because they are themselves. And when you get the feedback from people that thank you, they might not be working for you anymore, when they reach out and say, you know, thank you for the support you gave me, it means so much. So I'm really passionate about it. And our attackers, or the threats and the people that we fight against every day in cybersecurity, they're not all the same. And so we need a diverse team who can think creatively, fire each other up, behave in different ways, and really work together to combat some of the threats that we face. So I'm probably more passionate about diversity and inclusion than I am about security, although it's a tough battle. But they're my 2 reasons for getting out of bed and coming to work every day.
Thank you very much. We have the new generation. Unfortunately, also our association has not enough women, or not enough like the president, Andrea and Angelo, do want to have. You have an advice. There is a discussion, for example, now in Italy, it is about STEM and not enough women in the early ages that try to do maths or science, even before the discussion about cyber. You have an advice. We should start from school. It is a more cultural level. What do you think?
I mean, my thoughts were, you know, I think Italy is a very, very family-orientated culture, and so you start in schools, but also start with the parents, because a lot of the way our children are brought up is around nurture, and they're nurtured often, you know, it's part nature, but largely nurture. And so I think the parents and the schools are a really good place to start. So get out there and talk to schools and encourage them to pick STEM subjects. And then when we are recruiting, being open-minded about people's backgrounds, their education, and what they bring to the role. We also did some really practical things, like making sure we don't start interviewing until there are at least 2 female candidates, because if you've only got 1 female candidate, statistically, you won't hire a woman, you'll hire a man. Whereas if you get 2, all of a sudden, statistically, the percentage goes up to 50%. So I think there are some practical things that you can do. And then I think we need to make security and cybersecurity a bit less of a daunting field. Maybe some research into how people perceive it. We asked some school children in the UK, what did they think about cyber? And we had sort of two schools of thought. There were some people who thought it was a kind of an IT technology security function that was in the back office of a company and a bit geeky. And then we had other people who thought it was kind of hackers with hoodies. And so I think breaking down and creating a different perception for security is really important. So because it's a very altruistic business, whether it's physical security or cyber, we are there to protect things and people. So I think there's a different way of appealing to candidates that sell security in a different way.
Thank you very much. Angelo, to you, because we have another, let's say, 5 minutes, so maybe we can take another question and then open to the audience if they want to make the question directly to Emma.
There is no more questions I can see here. Can you see other questions in the chat?
Yeah, there's one from Daniela.
I see one, yeah, that is, I try to read. I'd like to have some information about the link between security and privacy. From your point of view, how is it possible to create better synergies?
It's a really good question. We have a privacy team in Vodafone who are separate to security, but we try to work very hard together. So the latest strategy that I mentioned was co-written actually with security. Now, there are some times where security and privacy don't agree. So to make, the ultimate protection would probably start to invade privacy. So there are some times when they will draw a boundary around our security measures. But we've tried to really make sure the strategy is written together. And then the other thing we've done is for new products, projects, new services that the company is building or developing, is we've created one security and privacy by design process. So that when a new project or a new product is being developed, we work collaboratively with the privacy team to make sure that it's being developed in the right way and it leads to a good secure and with privacy embedded in that product. And that's really joined the 2 teams together, because we did a mapping around all of the security controls and all of the privacy controls, and there was a really big overlap. There were some extra privacy things and some extra security things that the two areas don't overlap, but there was quite a high correlation in the things that we do care about. And then the other thing the privacy team did is they started using a strap line, which was there's no privacy without security. And that really helped, because security are one of the big enablers for privacy with things like encryption, for example. So we've really tried to work very hard to bring them together. And then where there's points of sort of tension or friction, we've just been very transparent and really talked about them. That's the way we've handled it, I think. Corradino, you work very closely in privacy. It's your role. What are your thoughts?
No, I also believe we use the word security for privacy. That is all about the data protection. So it really depends also on your point of view. So if you come from a technical background, you really appreciate the role of cyber, you see it as an ally. If you are a lawyer, you tend to work more on the contract side. Sometimes the lawyer misses this aspect that cyber is there for helping you. On the criticality of the data, as you mentioned, maybe the computer forensics or some security on the endpoint can be seen as intrusive for privacy. But if it's done well in a transparent way for employee or for customer, I think it's a plus, it's not a minus.
And I think privacy can really make security teams question why they're doing something, which is really important to keep saying, why are we doing that? Why are we monitoring that employee or that endpoint? And I think having them to keep us on the right course is really good.
Yeah. Not to mention then the support during data breaches, because if you see the first 3 or 4 questions of any privacy authorities is when it happened, how it happened, what you have done to avoid it repeating. Without cyber, you cannot answer these questions because
exactly.
are truly embedded
really
on
got,
the
yeah, really
aspect.
got to collaborate. Yeah.
Yeah. Angelo, I leave it to you for the last question coming from Arianna. And then I think you can do the final wrap up.
Weird enough, Corradino, I'm afraid to tell you that I can't see the other questions on the chat.
Okay, so I read it. Maybe you have a different, talking about the profile, someone in security has implemented the least privilege approach that we sponsor and need to know. Maybe a little bit too much. So I have a question regarding how to find a compromise between your global presence and the local specificities, and more precisely, how do you ensure a coherent and overall governance of security that need to comply to different regulation requirements which are defined at a national level, but also difficulties in culture. So I could probably global.
Yeah, I could spend an hour answering that question, Corradino, because I think we still talk about it a lot. So the way we approached it in Vodafone, and it has evolved over the last 5 years, is we started by writing down the accountabilities between the global teams and the local teams, and being clear about where the accountability sat between two teams. And then 2 years ago, we redid that and created what we call a blueprint. And that was about getting consistency in what sits locally and what sits centrally, and that they work really well together. And that's the key for me, is we're working towards a framework where it shouldn't matter where someone works. We want them all to be working in the same direction in the most efficient way possible and be very clear about their job. So we're moving to a model where we're trying to be less focused on whether somebody is global or local, but they're in cyber, their job is cyber defense, they are accountable for these things, and that's the direction of travel. It's a very hard balance, and the way we decided on what sits locally and what sits centrally is anything to do with local laws and regulations, local languages should stay local. The last mile of incident response is what we describe the local incident response. I think there always needs to be a local incident response capability. Local products or services, so any deviation from a global product should be managed locally. And then anything specific to the local strategy or business. And that's essentially how we defined the model. And then we looked at anything where we thought we could get benefit by bringing teams or services together. Cyber defense is the most obvious, but also if I even give you an example of a basic example of anti-malware on laptops and servers, using one tool and centrally configuring that tool with the best anti-malware people can give huge benefits versus having separate anti-malware consoles and products in every market. So it can be far more efficient sometimes and get better security. And we use those decision points to decide what to bring locally and what to leave locally and what to bring centrally. The cultural point's a really interesting one, and so I think it's important that the local security team really understand the local culture of the company and the community. And I think it's very difficult to centralize that, and it's really opened my eyes working in Vodafone to the very, very different cultures that we work in across the world.
Yeah, thank you very much. The last question, I would like to ask you your perspective on ethic principle as a security manager as to follow when it comes to making any kind of decision. So the decision-making process. Also, this one is an important high-level one.
Very important one.
The ethics of the security profession.
And ethics is it's a very personal thing, isn't it? There's no way of measuring people's ethics, and we've all got a different perspective on what's right and what's wrong. So typically I'd always have data at the heart of the decision making and try and use data to win arguments or to make a decision. And then I think we often hire in security people who have got high integrity and high transparency values. And I think when interviewing, you know the sorts of questions that come out, but the people who value integrity are often the ones who end up working in security, and that we really prize in security. And I tend to use, so I think it is a mix of data, judgment and experience. And then I think it's really important when you're making decisions that you seek the view of other people. And that starts to remove bias. So by hiring diverse teams with different opinions, you don't always get consensus, but you get really good debate about decisions. And then you can make a decision with as much information as possible. And to me, if you can explain why you made a decision afterwards, then you've started to win the battle on ethics. So if you imagine that in a year's time, you got asked, why did you make that decision? If you've got a really logical argument that explains why you made the decision, then I think you've started to take out some of the judgment and ethics. And so I always try and put myself in the shoes of a customer or in the shoes of a regulator, and what would they think about the decision I'm making, and does it still feel like the right decision?
Thank you very much. Angelo,
Yeah,
I leave it to you.
This is not a question, just something I would like to share with Emma, and thank you very much for your answers. Well, there's an explosive combination of the current scenario made of the digital divide, the new normal, the remote working, and let's say more interaction between public and private business, public agencies and private business as never seen before. Are you positive on the perspective of the future of cybersecurity in the business? I don't think it will stay the same. What's your thoughts?
It's a great question. I'm really positive because as we become more digital and in most sectors, cyber plays a really important role. So I think I'm really positive about the role that it will continue to play. I also think it's being recognised increasingly as a profession. And becoming a really attractive place for people to work through the great work that's happening in universities and schools and other places. And it's becoming more relevant inside companies. When I joined Vodafone, we were called technology security. It felt like we were sort of a subsection of technology. And we've been working really hard to make cyber relevant across the whole company, in particular to customers, so that it's seen as part of trust. The other trend that I'm seeing is that shareholders and investors and insurance companies are getting really focused on cybersecurity. And so when the shareholders ask the board questions or ask the company questions, it really focuses the effort and the energy that goes into security more generally. So I'm super positive. I'm worried about whether we're going to have enough people in cybersecurity going forward, and really keen to get more people into the sector. But I'm really positive about the opportunities that are there, and about the collaboration that can happen between companies.
Thank you very much. And speaking of profession, I know that is something that our young generation always ask, how do I become a cybersecurity expert? Do I go to the university for a diploma? Is there a certification? In our country, we are a bit behind Corradino, just to use an euphemism, on the career path and all the instruments and the tools and the skills on how to become a cybersecurity expert. What's your thought on that, Emma? What's the message you would like to deliver to our next generation on your profession?
The good news about the pandemic is that it's made training far more accessible, because most courses have had to go online. So I'd highly recommend ISACA, ISACA. They're an institute who do audit and security qualifications. There's one called CIS and a qualification called CISM, and one called CISP, and they're both really good. Great way to learn about security. There's also institutions like the SANS Institution who do great technical training and really help keep you up to date. So I'd recommend those as two places to go for people who want to learn more. But there's no experience like being in a security team and in a job. And actually, you can usually get an entry-level role in most teams without a security qualification. And that's the way I did it. I learned on the job and did my qualifications in parallel. And I got great experience by doing that. I think the qualification gives you a framework and a structure, and then the job gives you the experience of deploying that structure. So I think a balance of both is best, but I wouldn't don't let not having a qualification put you off. Still go for it, and you can always learn and study on the job.
Great message. Thank you, Emma. Corradino, anything you would like to add?
No, just we are running out of time. I want to thank Emma for the time and the advice. All the audience, we moved between 40 and 47. So the 41 that keep persisting show the interest for the inspiring talks from Emma. So thanks a lot, Emma. I leave it to you, Angelo, for the final wrap up and the closure.
So yes, Emma, thank you very, very much. Great added value with the information, positive message. So the last message I would like to give to the audience, put your pink glasses on. There's a great future waiting for you in cybersecurity if this is what you want to be in your future. And come back to us. Emma, if you don't mind, we'd like to write the names of this institute that you just gave as because that's very important. I think that's maybe that someone did not retain the name of this organization, which is very important. That's it. So good luck, best of luck for everything, and see you soon.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. Grazie.
Bye. Thank
Grazie.
you.
There you go.